Hope folks are in good health and good spirits, and at the end of the school year is bringing satisfaction and joy and all the rest. I don't have any big opening statements, Mr. Secretary. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's good to see everybody without the mask. It's great feeling to be actually get out a little bit and see things. We do have a couple people that would like to be introduced, and I'd like to start off with Dr. Schmertz. Has a new staff member, which we're very excited about.
Yes, thank you. Good to see all of you commissioners. Happy May to ride on Chairman Smerrick's good wishes. It's lovely to see all the cicadas for all of you who are enjoying that part of our world. I want to introduce Dr. Michael Leonard. He just joined as Associate Director for Research and Policy Analysis as of last Wednesday.
Yeah, wave your hand, Michael. Yeah, there we go.
Yes. He comes to us from finishing up his doctorate at The Ohio State University. So, Michael, why don't you just say a quick greeting before we move on with the meeting?
Thank you, Barbara. I appreciate that. Welcome. It is so nice to be here meeting all of you. As Barbara mentioned, my name is Michael Leonard, and I completed my PhD last year at Ohio State University, and I'm very happy to be here working at the Maryland Higher Education Commission and supporting the wonderful work you all do.
Welcome. Thanks for joining us. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Welcome. We're excited to have you, Michael.
Yes, I'm sure you'll see more of him as he presents material for all of you in the coming months. So first, he's just got to get to know the ropes. So await more from both of us. Thank you, Secretary, for giving us a chance to do introductions.
Thank you. And now I'd like to turn to Summit Kitty, and Jennifer Katz has an associate who's working with us this summer.
Thanks, Secretary. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Jennifer and I are very excited to have a law clerk with us this summer through the Office of Attorney General's Summer Law Clerk Program. Her name is Twee Langrel Miles. Wave so everyone can tell which tiny square you are. She just finished her first year at University of Maryland Law School. She has a bachelor's in applied psychology, magna cum laude from UC Santa Barbara. She's a Baltimore native, and she's very highly interested in higher education law. In fact, she interned with Towson University's General Counsel's office before she started law school. So she'll be working behind the scenes with me and Jennifer, and we're very excited to have her.
Excellent. Welcome. We're pleased to have you join us and bring a new perspective or an up-to-date perspective coming right from Towson. That's always interesting because Towson's been dealing with their own separate issues, as each institution has, with the pandemic responses. So I'm glad you're here. Thank you. Mr. Chair, those are the two main things, the two individuals which will be, added to the team, which is great. The other thing, of course, is that now the legislation has passed, the settlement has been signed, executed by the court system, so the coalition case is now complete, and we are taking a look at what internal reviews we need to do on regulations in COMAR in regard to the settlement, what changes it will precipitate, and then we'll be working with a consultant who is yet to be named. The Department of Legislative Services has that responsibility, and they are putting together an RFP now and hope to have someone on board by September, and then a initial report by December, and a year later another report after they complete their review of our processes. That's it for me.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Okay, we can move on with the agenda. I believe there are no public comments. Did anything come in at the last moment? Excellent. All right, let's move on to the minutes approval. Will there be a motion to approve the minutes that are in the book?
I'll move that the minutes.
I'll second it.
I think that's Commissioner Coleman and Commissioner Surkamp with the second. All right, any discussion, questions, comments, edits? Okay, seeing none, all in favor of approval? I'm sorry, did someone say something? No? Okay, so all in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Are there any opposed? Okay, very good. That passes. All right. Next up is Commissioner Committee updates. Commissioner Yeager, anything from the Education Policy Committee?
No, we actually did not meet this month, but when we meet next month in June, we need to elect a chair. And so we also need to find someone from the commission to fill in behind me on that committee as well.
Excellent. Thank you for the update on that and for all of your work certainly on the commission and with the committee. Okay, next is, pardon me, the Outreach Grants and Financial Assistance Committee. Commissioner Jackson, any update?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. And I apologize in advance if I have an internet interruption, but I'm going to try to be really quick. First of all, I want to thank Commissioner Coleman and Commissioner Miller for their diligent work on the committee. Although we didn't have a formal meeting this last month, our committee is still working. And so let me give you evidence of that. Commissioner Miller reached out to me to let me know that students have been trying to accept their award, and but the MDCAP server was overloaded. And so I reached out to Donna Thomas with this dilemma, and you know, our MHEC staff is always on it. Donna responded back, letting us know that they had worked out a resolution that the MDCAP server was overloaded, that there had been a significant number of users accessing the system, and that they addressed the issue by limiting the number of concurrent users that could access the system at one time until they could find a long-term fix. So I want you to know that while the committee may not be meeting every month, we're still responding to inquiries, to questions, to issues that pop up, and our MHEC staff is still working very diligently with us to get things resolved. So kudos to Donna, and thank you again for all of you, the commissioners, for your work on this effort.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Jackson. That's fantastic. And thank you to the staff.
Let me add to that, if I could, Commissioner Jackson. Thank you very much for the notice of the overload. The overload then was restricted down to 100 people at a time, which is still extraordinary. And we're contributing this to being all good news, and the fact that these students are really accessing everything electronically, because we've made that move to go from paper to electronic filing with interactive. So this is a very strong indication that this is happening at a more rapid pace. I just wanted to note that for all the commissioners, but thank you for noting that.
Very good. I believe that Vice Chair Mitchell is not with us today, so we can skip past the Finance and Operations Committee. So just over the next month or so, you can expect members that I and or the Secretary may darken your doorsteps about the chairmanship of the DEI Committee, which is new, and conversations about, unfortunately, replacing Commissioner Yeager with the Education Policy Committee. So stand by for more on that. Okay, unless there's anything else, I think we can probably move on to the rest of the agenda. Dr. Dow, the Student Advisory Council.
Absolutely. Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Smerek and Commissioners. I'm going to turn the time over to our Student Advisory Council Chair, Kyle Deenan. He is a undergrad student at College Park, and he has served in this past year as the chairperson for the Student Advisory Council. So, Kyle, I turn the time over to you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the introduction, and good afternoon to our commissioners. As Emily mentioned, I'm the chair of the Student Advisory Council, and what we're going to be discussing today is a grant recommendation for a technology grant for undergraduate and graduate students within the state. One of the key priorities that we noticed when we were entering the pandemic is our student leaders were pretty emphatic about concerns about increasing risks to access of higher education resources, specifically technological resources. One of the priorities that we had was exploring the learning mediums that are being used during our pandemic and trying to provide high quality access to technology that would increase those learning mediums. This technology grant, technology grant would be open to all students at post-secondary institutions in Maryland. It would be available for undergraduate students, graduate students, and international students, as well as students attending public, private, and career schools. The grant would be offered for people that are only in specific academic programs and that are degree seeking. The grant would be established to provide a minimum award of $300 to a maximum award of $1,000, and a student would apply through an application to either be given access to equipment and hardware as technology support, software as technology support, or an internet access as technology support. Students would be able to reapply for the award within a different category. So let's say in the first year of the award, they were given a grant fund for a laptop that they would need to complete their coursework. And then maybe another year down the line, if they needed some specific software to complete a STEM program, they would be able to apply for a grant within that same award for the next year. In terms of greatest need, students' need for the award would be determined by the FAFSA. Those students with the greatest need would be prioritized. Any award that would be offered would require the student to submit a request form and proof of their records and how they've been actually utilizing their the funds that are allotted to them. One of the reasons, as I mentioned earlier, that we wanted to provide this recommendation to the Commission is that during the pandemic, many of our student leaders were very strong that at-risk populations were not having access to learning mediums on their campuses. Many students would have to drive and sit outside of their community colleges or their four-year institutions just to get access to their Wi-Fi to complete their coursework. So having access to desktop computers, specialized software, or internet became a major issue of access for them to complete their undergraduate or graduate years, especially since the pandemic broke out. One of the problems that we've noticed is that post-secondary students are often not given much support in terms of having technology access and technology support. Tuition scholarships, grant scholarships usually cover tuitions and living costs. They do not cover technology needs. While this is something that's seen in elementary school, middle school, and even high school with students being given personalized technological devices, this is not something that's extended to our college populations. So in that sense, in the very changing world that we have post-pandemic, having access to such equipment is necessary for us to be successful as students. So in that sense, the Student Advisory Council strongly recommends that the Commission establish a technology grant to address that student issue.
Kyle, thank you very much. This is Jim Fielder speaking. Thank you very much for this. Now, this is a recommendation for the Commission. However, the Commission has no source of funds for this. So had that been discussed within your group? And if so, what was the recommendation regarding source of funds?
Yes, so this was something that was discussed at the recommendation of Dr. Dow. We were not specifically looking at the source of funds. We left that up to a conversation with the governor's office is what we would request to have that internal discussion of the needs that the student populations are facing, especially since we've become far more reliant on our in-person, I should say our virtual capacities, and we're no longer in person to the same extent. So we hope that we can broach a conversation with the governor's office and have some funding allotted towards this recommendation.
No, and just as a quick follow-up, I think that's a very, very strong recommendation. I would note that this last year, because of the pandemic and the federal funds, relief funds, and GEAR funds, that the individual institutions can seek reimbursement through MHEC by providing invoices of expenses they've incurred for the personal protective equipment, and even for technologies for the support of students. So some of the institutions did spend money on laptops, hotspots, all the technologies. But again, it's not as broad as I think what your recommendation covers. So thank you.
And if I could add a follow-up to that, Secretary Fielder, that was actually one of our main criteria when we looked at this issue. I represent College Park. College Park was very forward in their offering that they had for students, but a lot of our rural community colleges, rural universities, and our inner city universities, they were not able to provide the same access. And Many of our students would have to share technology with their children if they were older students that had children, just to be able to complete their college coursework. Ironically enough, it was a rather humorous moment when my laptop broke during finals and I didn't have access to complete anything, and I was having to ask all of my friends and family members just to have access to get on my websites to submit my assignments. So it's certainly a pressing need that's not universally addressed, and hopefully this could be a step in the right direction.
Thank you.
I think, I would just add to that. I think it's a strong recommendation, and it makes sense why this is needed. I simply have the same question that you raised, Secretary Fielder, is how would this be funded? So that would be an issue to be resolved. And not that this has anything to do with our work directly, but I'm just wondering if down the road, as colleges are assessing expenses that can be covered by financial aid, if there doesn't need to be some adjustment, then in addition to textbook, there are obviously technology expenses that students incur. So it may be something for financial aid association to do some work and do some lobbying.
Yes, thank you.
One just a process question, Secretary Fielder, for those of us who are somewhat new. Does MHEC follow the same kind of state process, like with the governor's development of a budget, where sometime, I guess, I don't know, in the spring, summer, maybe early fall, MHEC can provide recommendations to the budget, the governor's budget team on what kinds of things we would like to see funding for, and then they make the final determination on that? So is there a regular process by which we have conversations about potential additional funding?
The short answer is, very short answer is yes, and Jeff Newman can expound on that a little bit further.
As a state agency, we follow the regular budget process where we begin formulating our budget this summer, and we'll have discussions with DBM, the budget team that you mentioned, in the early fall, and they'll be discussing that budget with each state agency between September and December to put the budget together for the budget bill, which is introduced about the second week of January to the General Assembly.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Well, Secretary Fielder,
Sure.
Maybe the commission can have a conversation over the summer and the fall about this kind of proposal and other things that are on your and your team's agenda and other commissioners.
Thank you. Yes. Dr. Dow, I think you had a second item.
Sure. Commissioner McDaniel, I just saw that you came off mic. I didn't know if you.
Thank you. I was going to ask the student commission, if a grant like this did become available, was there any conversation about how you would make students aware of opportunities like this? Because, the students without technology are often the most least informed, and, even if there are grants out there that they could take advantage of, how would you publicize something like that? I was just curious.
Sure. So we did have that internal conversation. I think we came to two main conclusions. One, the students that were the most at risk for technology were also the ones that were requesting it from their institutions. So if a student was not able to have, I know that one of our student members was discussing a student that was working at their kitchen table at 4 o'clock in the morning using their son's laptop just to complete her coursework. So that student went through the process of asking their institution, asking what existed. And the short answer was, when you're on campus, we have the offering for you. Since it's the pandemic, we really don't know. We're kind of in a holding pattern. We're going to see what we can do to provide that for you. I think one of the strengths of having this recommendation, if the commission would provide either the funding or the access to these things, is that you could apply with your FAFSA, be screened for your financial aid, and then when an institution looks at your financial profile, they can determine those things for you and can have an active hand in that. The second thing, and this leads to a more global perspective of the way the students see the Maryland Higher Education Commission, is actually developing better working relationships with their student populations. As the chair, many times I've met with people from across the state, and have to sit them down and give a 5-minute presentation on what MHEC is and what it does, when scholarships become available, and how you can actually use it to progress through your college career. So I think having a wider conversation and a stronger awareness of what the Commission does also gives a greater understanding of what they provide for you as a student, especially if you're an at-risk student.
Thank you. Thank you.
I have two questions. This is Commissioner Coleman. Is there a GPA requirement, and can a entering first year student also apply for this grant?
Yes, so there is no GPA requirement that we recommended. Again, this would be a discussion that the Commission would have internally to set those requirements. We did not take that as a responsibility of ours, but we did not request that a GPA requirement would be prevalent. The second thing is, in terms of your eligibility, you would be eligible whatever year you're entering college, whether you're a first or 4-year student, it would not matter. The key is demonstrating the greatest financial need and having our students prioritized on the basis of that financial need through the FAFSA or the MISFA.
Great. If there are no other questions, Kyle, if you would be willing to move on to the report, the annual report.
Of course. So as mentioned with a little bit earlier, one of the challenges our group faced was a significant learning curve associated with really understanding the way that state education policy works and how it affects our universities, community colleges, private trade schools, and our other institutional entities across the state. In this sense, Commissioner Miller was a fantastic add-on this year for our council, and really gave us the perspective of the Commission on key issues, even something as straightforward as what Mr. Coleman presented, where, if we're going to actually fund this award, who's being affected, how are we going to go about the mechanics of making sure it's effective? So Commissioner Miller was very effective in that regard. One of the priorities that I set as the chair was having a much broader and deeper discussion on state education issues and having more student voices at the table. I've served on the Student Advisory Council for 3 years. I've represented both a four-year university that's public and a community college. And one of the major problems that we had every single year was a lack of participation and a lack of active discussion on issues that we could realistically address. Many times students come to the table with transfer process is really difficult, and I have great empathy for them because I understand that process is very difficult. But to have us jump in and try to solve that issue within a year, that's really not acceptable. It's not a very effective use of our time. So one thing that I tried to do was have a much broader coalition of student voices at the table. We reached out to our USMSC, our University of System of Maryland Student Council, and liaisoned with them. We created a collaboration with our Faculty Advisory Council that we sent over to Chair Schmerich and the Secretary Fielder. And then we had extensive conversations with the Department of Health, focusing on everything from mental health resources to COVID contact tracing. One of the other things that we've done this year is we presented the voting recommendation to you all, I believe, back in October. And then that was forwarded to the governor's office, and we created the technology recommendation. So we've had a much more effective year, and I think that really came down to, one, prioritizing our tasks and executing them in an according manner, and second of all, making sure that the things that we prioritize were in line with the goals of the Commission. One of those goals was actually having a wider discussion on the 5-year state plan. We included students from across the University System of Maryland and from across our community colleges within our group, to make sure that a greater understanding of that process was coming out and a greater feedback would be offered, and making sure that we not only set realistic expectations of what we could accomplish, but also making sure that those were in line with what the Commission was trying to work on and had a more broad and diverse group of student individuals at the table from our respective institutions. In terms of planning for our next year, my allergies have been quite annoying this morning. In terms of our planning for next year, we've set several key goals. We have approached the issue of diversity, equity, inclusion under my group at a little bit different capacity. Many times we build whole committees. I've done this at my respective institution to specifically address DEI issues within education. And for me, I use those as lenses through every single decision we make. When we looked at the technology recommendation, the first question was, what is the DEI lens of who is this affecting, who are the marginalized student populations, and how can we support them through this legislation offering, or this grant offering, I should say. So continuing to work with our DEI groups and continuing to build out our DEI offering within our recommendations in the future is something that we've slated for this next year. Also looking at greater accessibility for our credit for prior learning. That is a major thing that we're looking at for next year, whether you are coming from a military background, you have some prior work experience, or you're a transfer student, having your credit for prior learning universalized, especially within our four-year institutions, and having them come to terms that, you know, if we could have similar requirements for similar course offerings and how they're accepted, that's in the student's best interest. And then also looking at higher education funding and making sure that we have a better understanding of state scholarships, the timelines for those, and having an expanded outreach. And a lot of that comes down to coordination with not only our Faculty Advisory Council, but our other student councils across the state that we maintain touch with.
Kyle, that was an excellent report. An additional question. Did you internally have any discussions about the distinctions with apprenticeships, badges, certificates, licensure, credit versus non-credit, and how that starts to blend into the 2 and 4 year institutions?
That was not an active discussion we had as an agenda item on our commission, but it was something that was brought up throughout the year in multiple capacities.
Okay.
My experience working with that, the student opinion on those issues is that the more that our universities, especially because the natural pathways to move from your community college or from your private trade school into university, that's the more common pathway, is to have our four-year universities clarify and really present a united front with what's accepted and why. I know that many of our nursing students and pre-professional track students have voiced this issue, that they'll finish their undergraduate degree at College Park or finish their undergraduate degree at Towson and then move to University of Maryland, Shady Grove, and not have their coursework accepted. And understanding why those things are set up the way that they are, and really looking at the process of credit for prior learning, that's a major priority for this next upcoming year. We've addressed it in a slight capacity, just in informal discussions, but the more formalized discussions are something that we're hoping to have in the future.
Thank you, that's helpful.
Kyle, this is a very impressive report that you're giving us, having been on the commission for some time. It looks as if the student council's part of it is really activating itself in a positive way. I very much like you tying some of your goals to the 4-year plans that the commissioner have come up with, especially for this period that's just ahead of us. And I look forward to seeing where you end up with those issues. Thank you for your work this past year.
Well, you are certainly welcome, Commissioner Boyd, and it's not a job, but it's certainly a labor of love, and we love our university system, our community colleges, and our private schools, so we're all very invested on the back end, as I know that you all are as well.
Thank you, Commissioner Boyd. Any other questions, comments, thoughts from commissioners? Excellent. Okay, Dr. Dow, is there anything else left on this? No?
No, sir. Thank you. And thank you, Kyle.
Very nice. Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. You did us a real service, so thank you to you and all those you worked with. Okay, Secretary Fielder, over to you, Mr. Newman and Ms. Thomas.
Yes, I'd have Jeff go ahead and give us a brief update on where we are in budget, in the Relief Act, the GEAR Act, and so forth.
Okay, well, we're preparing to get ready for the new fiscal year, which begins July 1st. Going through the budget actions that were approved by the General Assembly, and community colleges and Sellinger institutions did pretty well this session, and for operating funding, and then the community colleges for capital funding as well. We still are working with our GEAR funding to get it out to the institutions. We have until December to be able to get those funds out to them. We've sent the relief funds to the institutions before the end of this fiscal year. So that's relief fund from the state that institutions received. And then we have another set of GEAR 2 funding from the federal level, which will be the institution will be able to receive through within the next year and a half. So Benet Edwards in our grants management team has been working closely with those funds to properly execute getting those funds out to the institutions. So that's where we are with the budget. And again, when the new fiscal year begins, we start the fund process. Aubrey Bascom starts the fund process of closing out this year, which is always a very busy exercise and making sure all the funds were expended the way they were supposed to be expended and reporting to the General Accounting Division of the Comptroller's Office. So the two action items on the agenda are from the Office of Student Financial Assistance regarding regulations related to two of our scholarship programs. So I'll turn it over to Donna Thomas to present those to you.
Thank you, Jeff. Good afternoon, everyone. Donna Thomas, Director for the Office of Student Financial Assistance. On page 14 of the commission booklet, you will find the memo as well as the regulations for approval of proposed amendments to the COMAR financial aid regulations for, final adoption. I skipped ahead, sorry, to Richard Collins. So let me take a step back and go back to EEA. So on page 14, you will find the memo and regulations for final adoption of the amendments to the COMAR regulations for the Delegate Howard P. Rawlings Educational Excellence Awards Program. On February 24th, the Commission approved for publication in the Maryland Register the proposed amendments to the regulations for the Delegate Howard P. Rawlings Educational Excellence Awards Program. The purpose of these amendments is primarily to add the new process, which will allow institutions to do the verification process in the Guaranteed Access Grant Program as required by statute. The regulations also added additional appeal criteria for late FAFSA filers and clarify the recipient selection process and replace the term alternative application with NISPA throughout the regulations. The proposed regulations were published in the Maryland Register on April 9, 2021. The public comment period for the regulations ended on May 10, 2021, and no public comments were received. The proposed amendments to the regulations are ready for the Commission's final adoption with a non-substantive change to the text on Regulation 0.08b to correct a single word as reflected in the track changes that you will see in the Commission booklet. The amendments will become effective 10 days after notice of the final adoption is published in the Maryland Register. I'll proceed with reading the recommendation. It is recommended that the Commission approves for final adoption the attached amendments to the regulations for the Delegate Howard P. Rawlings Educational Excellence Award Program, including the non-substantive change reflected in the attachment. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so just to review the bidding here, so this is a vote on the final adoption, and this has come before us a couple of times before, and the only change to what we've seen in the past is that the change of the word initial to renewal in 0.08, correct?
That is correct.
Very good. Okay, are there any questions, comments, thoughts from the Commission about this? Okay, is there a motion for approval of final approval of the new regulations, the new language?
Yes, this is Commissioner Jackson. I move that we move forward with this recommendation.
This is Commissioner McDaniel. Second the motion.
Excellent. All right, so we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion, questions, comments, concerns? Okay, so all in favor of the motion for final approval, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Commissioner Yeager, I saw your microphone go on. Did you want to have a question or comment?
Oh, just aye, that's all.
Okay, very good, thank you. Are there any opposed? All right, very good, that passes. All right, thank you, Ms. Thomas. Next.
Thank you. The next item is on page 19. On page 19, you will find the memo as well as the proposed amendments to Comar Financial Aid Regulations for the Richard W. Collins III Leadership with Honor Scholarship Program. During the 2021 session, the legislature passed House Bill 1124/Senate Bill 40 to amend the Richard Collins Leadership with Honor Scholarship Program. The amendments included the current 25% of total funds for the scholarship are allocated for students at Bowie State University, and 75% of those funds are allocated for students at the other 3 HBCUs in the state. The changes to the particular program are so that at least 25% of the total funds are for students at Bowie State University. That way the funds can be more evenly distributed to individuals that attend the other 3 institutions if they have a higher number of applicants. Enclosed for your review and approval are proposed regulatory amendments that reflect the change to the scholarship allocation as described above. Additionally, they include a change to the application deadline. The purpose of this change is an effort for MHAC to be able to get awards out earlier to applicants that apply for the scholarship in their initial year. Upon approval, the proposed regulations and regulatory amendments are submitted to the Legislators' Joint Committee on Administrative, Executive, and Legislative Review, better known as AELR, after which they are submitted to the Division of State Documents for publication in the Maryland Register. After a public comment period, they may be brought back before the Commission for final adoption. The recommendation: it is recommended that the Commission approve for publication in the Maryland Register the enclosed proposed regulatory amendment to the Richard Collins Leadership with Honor Scholarship Program and authorize its Assistant Attorney General to make non-substantive edits to the proposed regulations to conform to the stylistic and formatting requirements of ALR and DSC. Happy to take any questions.
Donna, could you give a quick review of the fully subscribed in the number of students that it covered?
Yes, so for the 2021 academic cycle, the average award in this particular program was a little over $5,000 to eligible applicants. The majority of the applicants that did apply were awarded. We did have some applicants that did not submit all the necessary information, but we did reach out to those 4 HBCUs just to work with them and gave them additional time if they did submit the documents afterwards. I do not recall the exact number of recipients that were awarded this year, but I do know that it was more than 50 individuals, and that includes initials and renewals. One thing that we are doing in effort to prevent students who do not submit documentation to prevent them from not receiving the award is to increase our outreach with those 4 HBCUs. I do have direct communication with the ROTC individuals at the campus. And so one example I can give you is that when the application became available for the 21-22 academic year, we did send out correspondence to the institutions letting them know what's available. The ROTC individual at Morgan State has already been in contact with me. I've been providing updates. And again, that is an effort to make sure that all eligible applicants are able to utilize this funds.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Any questions from commissioners about this?
Donna, I just wanted to be a little clearer on the 25%. What was going on that we needed to make that change?
Sure. Before the prior legislative change, the law pretty much required that 25% of the funds go to Bowie and the remaining 75%. So what that did was that meant that whatever number of eligible recipients were at Bowie State University, they controlled the actual dollar amount that we were able to spend across the board in all institutions. So the change therefore allows us to allocate again at least 25%, but if we have more applicants at the other 3 institutions, we can continue to award them, and they can also receive an additional award amount if need be at those institutions.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Commissioner Boyd. Other questions and comments? Okay, so the vote here is for publication of this new language, which is essentially just the we're codifying the legislative changes that came down in the 2021 session, particularly related to the 25%. So this is updating the regulations to make sure that it's in alignment with the new legislation, right?
Yes, and then we did make the change with regards to the application deadline.
Excellent. Yes, thank you. Okay, so this is a vote on publication in the register of this new language. Okay, if there are no further questions or comments, oh, please, Commissioner McDaniels.
Thank you. I'm sorry I was hitting my words, but I do have a question also on the 25% allocation. Changing it to say that at least 25% be allocated to Bowie. Suppose the Bowie students rise to a level above 25% of the total. Would that begin to restrict the other institutions to what they're allotted? Again, could it work the other way to restrict the total number available to other students?
That's an excellent question. I can tell you just based on these past 2 years with regards to the number of applicants that we received, we have not been in a situation where we have completely exhausted all funds. So I say that to say that with this change, if we do have more applicants at Bowie State, the law does allow us to increase the allocation over the 25%. And still be able to service those individuals at the other 3 HBCUs. But that may potentially become an issue if the number of applicants that apply for the program exceed the available funding levels that we have. One thing that we do is that we wait to see the total number of applicants that are eligible for the award, and then take that total number and kind of split it up across the board just to ensure all students are awarded. So,
thank you.
Welcome.
Yeah, the only I would add to that Donna does a tremendous job with this. Richard Collins was the lieutenant who was to be commissioned the next day and unfortunately was killed. He was in the Bowie ROTC program, which is the one that's the strongest, and I think that we'll see the ROTC program continue to expand at the other HBCUs because of this scholarship fund. So we're hopeful we'll continue to monitor that, and as there are additional requests and applicants, then we would go back to revisit with the legislature about expanding the cap on it.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent, thank you. Any further questions or comments? Okay, if not, would someone mind making a motion then to approve our publication in the register of the new regulatory language?
Chair Smirek, I so move.
Thank you, Commissioner. I think that's Commissioner Boyd. Is
Yes.
there a second? Thank you.
Commissioner Coleman, second.
Thank you, Commissioner Coleman. Okay, any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, so all in favor of approving the new regulatory language, say aye. Aye. Are there any opposed? Okay, seeing none. Thank you so much, Ms. Thomas, Mr. Newman, Secretary Fielder. That looks great. Let me just double check here. I think we've hit everything. Secretary Fielder, am I missing anything?
No, you've covered everything. The next meeting is scheduled for June the 23rd. I think that we'll still be looking at virtual maybe into the fall, and then be reevaluating once we know that we've all reached that herd immunity, if we want to call ourselves a herd. The second thing is to recognize that we have 2 analysts from Annapolis that have joined us on these meetings, which I really appreciate their involvement in, so they can better understand what we do and how we do. So I really appreciate everybody's attention today. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Secretary Fielder and Dr. Dow and your entire team, and thank you to the commissioners and Mr. Deneen for his participation. Is there anything else for the good of the order? All right, seeing none, does someone want to make a motion to adjourn?
I'll move that we adjourn, Commissioner Surkamp.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
I think Commissioner McDaniels and Coleman tied on that one. So I'm going to give it to Commissioner Coleman. Okay, seeing that there's no discussion about adjournment, all in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Very good. All right, well, thank you, everyone. Have a great May and June, and we'll see you in a month. Secretary Fielder, thank you much.
Yeah, thank you. Just stay safe, everybody.
Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.